to the Candid Sister Podcast, where faith and business meet with clarity. For women called to lead with wisdom, order, and grace, healing what's hidden, building what lasts. This is your space for real conversations, strong leadership, and sustainable growth with your host, Conchata L. Hosley.
Hey sis, welcome back to the Candid Sister Podcast. Over the last few episodes, we have been building a foundation for this new season. We started by talking about why this podcast is not starting over, but maturing. Then we talked about how my emotional healing directly affect my business operational healing. And in the last episode, we talked about what happens when business problems are not really business problems. We talked about the reality that sometimes the issue we are trying to fix is only the visible symptom of something deeper. So today, I want to bring all of that into one central idea that is shaping this season. And I want to define it clearly. Today, I want to tell you what I mean when I say business soul care. Because I know that phrase can sound unfamiliar, it can even sound soft if people hear it too quickly. Some people may assume I'm talking about self care, rest culture, emotional comfort, or simply taking a break from pressure. That is not what I mean. And I want to be very clear about that from the beginning. When I say business soul care, I'm not talking about escaping responsibility. I'm not talking about avoiding structure. I'm not talking about using healing language to make room for passivity, poor stewardship, or emotional indulgence. I'm not talking about making leadership easier by lowering standards. What I mean by business soul care is something much more serious than that. Business soul care is the work of addressing the internal and operational fractures that silently affect how a leader carries her business. It is work of noticing when your leadership has become heavier than it should be. It is the work of paying attention to what is happening beneath the visible demands of the company. It is the work of recognizing when strain, depletion, grief, pressure, fear, over responsibility, and misalignment have started shaping the way decisions are made, the way systems are built, the way growth is carried, and the way leadership is experienced internally. It's not just about how the business looks from the outside, it's about what the business is requiring from the inside of the leader. That is why I use the word soul here. Not because I'm trying to be abstract, not because I'm trying to be poetic, but because there are parts of leadership that cannot be understood only through workflow charts and productivity systems. There is an internal reality to leadership. There is a way that the business sits on the mind, sits on the emotion, sits on the body, and sits on the spirit of the person carrying it. And if that internal reality is ignored long enough, the business often begins to reflect the cost. That reflection can show up in a lot of ways. It can show up as decision fatigue. It can show up as overbuilding. It can show up as constant urgency. It can show up as unclear priorities, weak delegation, bottlenecks, inconsistent execution, or a founder who cannot seem to get ahead no matter how much she works. It can show up as a business that is growing, but not in a way that feels governed. It can show up as a leader who looks functional on the outside, but internally feels fragmented, heavy, and unable to sustain what she has built. That is where business soul care becomes necessary because not every business problem is solved by adding more systems. Sometimes the business needs healing at the level of how it is being carried. Sometimes the founder needs greater clarity before she needs greater complexity. Sometimes the structure needs recalibration because it has been built around survival, compensation, and endurance instead of peace, order, and sustainable growth. That is the distinction I want listeners to understand. Business soul care is not self care branding for women who want to feel better for a day. It is leadership recalibration for women who want to build and govern in a way that does not silently erode them. It is the process of telling the truth about what the business has been costing, what the structure is still lacking, what the founder has been compensating for, and what needs to be restored if the company is going to mature well. And this conversation is timely. The Deloitte Touche 2025 Women at Work study found that only 51% of women rated their mental health as good or extremely good. 36% said their stress levels were higher than a year ago. And 25% said they have taken time off work in the past year because of mental health challenges. Gallup also reported in March 2026, this is a recent data research, and that nearly a third of full-time employed women in the US, a third, say they very often or always feel burnt out at work. So when I say this is not a fringe issue, I mean that women are carrying measurable pressure. The question is whether we are developing mature language and mature solutions for that pressure, especially for women responsible for leading something real. That is why this phrase matters to me. I felt it. I've been in that moment where grief has caused me to stop my business and then became inconsistent in revenue. And then next thing I know, I'm in debt because I did not take the proper timing, the proper aspects of moving through the grief. Now, I'm not saying that the grief had just immediately disappeared. No, it didn't. But what I'm saying is there is a measurable way to work through this where it does not affect the decisions I'm making for my business and still keep revenue consistency as well as keeping my health and my boundary and my peace in place. I needed language that could hold both the internal and the operational at the same time. I needed to understand it. And I needed language that honored the fact that a business can be technically functioning while the leader is being quietly worn down by how it functions. I needed language that could explain why some founders are not failing because they are incapable, but because they are carrying in their own bodies emotions and minds what their business architecture should have already been holding. And I needed language that made room for both honesty and governance. That is what business soul care does. It gives us a way to talk about business strain without reducing it to productivity. It gives us a way to talk about healing without disconnecting it from responsibility. It gives us a way to talk about leadership maturity without pretending that systems alone solve everything. And it gives us a way to tell the truth about what many women have normalized for too long. Because let me say this plainly, some women have normalized a level of strain that should never have become their baseline. Let me say that one more time. Some women have normalized a level of strain that should have never become their baseline. They have normalized carrying too much emotionally. They have normalized making decisions while depleted. They have normalized chronic pressure, chronic urgency, and chronic internal fragmentation. And there's in understanding this, I can see why hustling can become a quick fix because who wants to go through those things? Who wants to go through chronic pressure? Who wants to go through chronic urgency? Who wants to go through chronic internal fragmentation? These things have been normalized building in ways that consistently cost them peace. And because the business is still operating, they assume that strain is just the price of serious leadership. I don't believe that. I really don't. I believe serious leadership requires truth. I believe it requires stewardship. I believe it requires structure, and I believe it requires enough honesty to admit when the business is no longer being carried in a way that is sustainable, aligned, or whole. That is why business soul care is not optional language for me, it is governing language. It helps ask better questions. Where is this business asking me to carry? What structure should hold? Where have I built around survival instead of sustainability? Where am I calling something discipline when it's actually depletion? Where have I mistaken pressure for purpose? Where do I need not where do I need not just a better plan, but a more honest recalibration of how I am leading and what my business is demanding from me now? Those are the kind of questions that begin changing things, especially for me. Because once you can name what is happening, you can govern it differently. Once you can distinguish between a superficial problem and a deeper fracture, you stop solving everything at the surface. Once you can tell the truth about what the business has been costing you, you become more capable of building something that supports your life instead of silently consuming it. That is what I mean by business soul care. It is not retreat from leadership, it is restoration within leadership. It is not softness without stewardship. It is honesty with responsibility. It is not an excuse to disengage from business maturity. It is part of what makes mature business leaders possible. And if this language resonates with you, it may be because you have felt this even if you did not have words for it yet. You may have sensed that the issue in your business was deeper than systems, deeper than time management, deeper than visibility, deeper than motivation. You may have felt that something in the way you were carrying the business was no longer sustainable, but you did not know how to describe it without sounding emotional, weak, or unclear. This is the language for that place. And if that is where you are, let this episode be permission to stop minimizing what your leadership has been carrying. Don't dramatize it. Don't shame yourself for it, but don't dismiss it either. Let it become language. Let it become clarity. Let it become a more mature way of understanding what your business may actually need from you in this season. Because sometimes the shift does not begin when you find the perfect strategy. Sometimes it begins when you finally have truthful language for what has been happening all along. And I can't tell you, it took 20 years of me operating in business, helping other businesses to build structure, build systems, build operations, managing other businesses' operation, and realizing that this is really the scope of what I have seen in 20 plus years of also being in business and as well as working for others in operational management, project management, different type of leadership positions. And this has become an integral part of my business continuity structure, right? I have built many systems and workflows and programs around this concept because it helped me maintain a structure of peace even as a leader and a CEO and a founder of my company. And my healing projectly works through the decision making of my business. And I'm like, aha, that's it. My emotional awareness as well as my operational awareness go hand in hand because I'm the leader that's making this quality decisions for this business as well as for my team, as well as for other leaders whom I'm helping to coach and govern. This is an integral part to understand about your business. And I am so happy to provide this information for you. Therefore, if this episode gave language to something you have been feeling but could not yet name, stay with me because in the next episode, I want to start moving this conversation into the first practical shifts. Once we can name business soul care clearly, the next question becomes what does operational healing actually begin to look like in practice? Where does a founder start when she realized the business needs a different kind of order. That is where we are headed next. Until then, let yourself tell the truth about what leadership has been requiring from you. And let that truth become the beginning of wiser stewardship. And as always, stay fearless, stay focused, stay fabulous. I see you in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Candid Sister Podcast. A space for faith-driven women in business to grow with clarity, order, and peace. Until next time, keep building what lasts and lead with wisdom.